So there's a couple tables that are in the WebLim, and if you're trying to figure out, the impact on your labor, if you're working 6/10s, for instance, there are a couple charts. One of them is this overtime multiplier at time and a half, and then there's also one at double time. And you can go look up on that chart, and it'll tell you what the inefficiency factor is for working that particular shift. So 6/10s is a 17% inefficiency. And then it'll also tell you the percentages you would need to change it from if you were working 6/10s, to change those equivalent hours to straight time hours. And then you can apply your normal straight time rate to that. Okay, so for instance, if we're working 6/10s, if I come across, you got 70 hours paid for 60 hours work, and there's your 17% inefficiency. And if you were to change your hours from straight time hours to time and a half hours is also 17%. Your total multiplier would be 1.41, and that takes into account working time and a half and also working 6/10s. So if I were to take my total number of hours times 1.41, and if I'm working 6/10s, and multiply it times a straight labor rate instead of a time and a half labor rate, I would in effect have added the time and a half to it.
You have the right labor dollars if you do that.
That's correct, labor dollars.
But this table will give you both, quick multipliers for the effective labor rate and then the inefficiency of working the longer hours. And that's what is important about this particular table.
And there's one table, this one is for time and a half, and then the other one is for double time. So it gives you all those different scenarios of working. We actually do this problem during this WebLim class that we do. It's a day and a half class. We first have them go through and figure the problem, work the problem without showing them that table. And it takes them about 25 to 30 minutes to work this problem. And then we show them this table, and literally within 2 minutes you can run that same problem through that table and come up with the answer. So that is a very good table to be used when you're trying to figure overtime calculation in dollars, not hours, in dollars. The next slide is really talking about graphically what the effects are of overtime on your productivity. This particular table was distributed by the Department of Labor, and I've got a few of them here. Some of them are by the Construction Industry Institute, some by the Department of Labor. But the point is there have been studies that have been made on overtime, the effects of working overtime on your hours. I guess that I would say that I don't like about this one is it doesn't consider time or the effect over time. So it's just saying that, boom, right out of the gate, I'm going to be 17% inefficient at working 6/10s. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with that one, but that is a study that has been done. The next slide here, this one I like a little bit better. It shows you over a duration of 4 weeks. And if I'm working 6/10s, it's showing me that there's my 17% inefficient over those 4 weeks. What I also like is, week one, I'm only at about 92 or 93% inefficient. And so it's just saying that, okay, I'm working 6/10s, I'm getting in my groove. I haven't seen, I haven't fallen off to that 17% inefficiency until I'm out to about week 4. Then this next slide actually takes it out over 12 weeks. So 6/10s is on the bottom, and you can see out here at 12 weeks being about that same inefficiency. But what they show is after week 1, there was a dip, and then it actually got a little bit better. So I don't know, maybe you're working, night shift or something, and they got into their groove after that first week. Then productivity actually picked up just a little bit before it started falling off after about week 3 or 4. We used to use this graph and that particular chart and this particular chart for our shutdown work. Typically this one, because most of our shutdowns were 4 weeks or shorter, and we use that one a lot, and especially when you're trying to use it for change orders or whatnot with a client. At least these particular charts have been tried in court and have held up. Both that one through the Department of Labor and these from Construction Industry Institute.
This is actually Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, this one's U.S. Corps of Engineers. So we've used those for figuring overtime impacts. Then Tim was saying earlier about performance factors. You know, what is a performance factor that you should apply to the MCA labor units? You know, so and that's the question that we get asked at every one of the seminars that we do is, what is that number? I want to go back and use it. You know, and I guess what we would say to you is when we formulated the labor units, what we try to do is to have about a 0.75 multiplier as a good safe unit for your normal crew. You know, whenever you've produced an estimate, you know, obviously you need to talk to whoever runs your manpower to find out what the crew availability is going to be to perform that job. You might have the A crew available. If you do, you know what, 7.5 might be a little bit too high. Go ahead and take it down to 0.65 or whatever the number should be. Get more aggressive on it so that you can get the job. You want to get it. You got your A crew available. By the same token, if you know, a few years ago when there were no guys on the bench and you had to have a lot of travelers, you didn't know what you were going to get. So you know what? That 0.75 might not have worked at that time. Might have been a 0.85. Okay, so follow the methodology there on how to do that. Okay, so now some of the people will say, well, okay, but you know, so how do I figure out that 0.75? Well, historically, you'd have to look back over some of the jobs that you've done, and I would suggest that make sure that you do it with something that doesn't have a lot of change effect to it or change orders, and that affected your job. That you know, you basically you installed what you bid. So you know, and I've always said that, man, I'd like to bid something, and I want to go put in exactly what I bid, and I don't want no change orders. I just want to go do what I signed up to do. You know, and then go do it. So as long as you're looking or comparing a job that wasn't affected by a lot of change orders or changes, then you'd be able to really hone in on what that number was, that 0.75 or whatever it is for your particular company. All the different estimating products have multiple labor columns in them, so that now we can say, okay, I want to extend it by one labor column and I want to compare it to a different labor column, for instance. So they all have that capability within the softwares today.
I continue to find that basic assumptions are specific to a company. So in a lot of cases, you'll see that companies won't add labor for cleanup maybe, or they won't add labor for material handling that's further than 200 feet. You know, those are real common things that sometimes people just include in their labor. So one contractor may be talking about, well, I use a 0.75, and the other might be talking, well, I use a 0.85. They may actually be exactly the same. You know, it goes back to that same question, what should my factor be? I can't tell you what your factor is because I don't know your basic assumptions. And I think that's one of the things that is really evident when we first start talking to contractors is it would take probably an hour of questioning for Ron and I to try to figure out, is their factor similar to somebody else's factor?